Welcome to this week's midweek Space Startup News Roundup. I'm going to talk about some social media posts and web articles I found on space news this week. As usual, well, first of all, you can follow us on X at Space Startup Hub. I post links to my YouTube videos with descriptions. So let's get into the first article. And this is on Lunar Outpost. And they are developing an LTV, or Lunar Terrain Vehicle, for NASA for crew mobility on the surface of the moon. So they say, so you build a space truck, now how does it get to the moon? Proudly launching first on SpaceX Starship, the Eagle Lunar Terrain Vehicle's adaptive architecture is built to work with any lander provider, scaling opportunities for public and private partners on the lunar surface. Eagle's flexibility supports NASA's approach of flying multiple commercial landers as they build towards an enduring lunar presence. And we have an image of the vehicle. As you can see in the front, you've got the Eagle, which can carry 2 crew, and it can also be moved remotely or teleoperated. So we have some other images of the Eagle vehicle. So it's already built, or there's prototypes built, and they've been testing it in the desert to make sure that it's rugged and it can handle slopes and divots and so on. You can see there's ramps to enter or leave the rover. And then we have some more renders. You can see in the background is the Apollo 1970s rover. And now you have the upgraded Lunar Outpost Eagle vehicle with solar panels and a robotic arm. And here you can see the seats where the crew sit. They've got handles on either side. And then we have another render here, Eagle. And you can see the partners here, Leidos, MDA Space from Canada, Goodyear, presumably for the tires, and General Motors, and then Lunar Outpost. Lunar Outpost also develops smaller rovers, some of which are flying on missions to the moon. So they have various different sizes, from micro rovers to mini rovers to the full-size Eagle, which can carry 2 crew. And that will be in competition with various other rovers for the NASA contract. Talking about other rovers, let's move on to Astrolab and their partnership with Interlune. So Astrolab are working on the Flex rover, which is a competitor to the Eagle rover, and they've announced a partnership with Interlune. I may have covered this already, but we have some more information about it and a render. So the post says, Astrolab and Interlune Space have made an exciting announcement that we are working together to integrate lunar excavation technology onto our Flex rover. This collaboration brings together Interlune's resource harvesting expertise with Flex's adaptive mobility to advance commercial infrastructure on the moon, from helium-3 extraction to road and berm construction for moon base site preparation. Prototype testing will take place in Houston, where both companies have research and development facilities. Astrolab was the first company to lease testing space at the Texas A&M University Space Institute, currently under construction at NASA's Johnson Space Center. This builds on our ongoing partnership, as Interlune previously announced plans to fly a multispectrum camera on our FLIP mission to estimate helium-3 concentrations in lunar regolith. And we have the render here. So you can see the Flex rover, and at the front they've got some kind of excavator that's digging up the lunar soil, or regolith as it's called. So it's integrated Interlune technology onto the Astrolab Flex rover, and is currently undergoing testing and prototyping in Texas. We also have an article from the Astrolab website, so let's just read that now. I've already marked it up. This is Interlune and Astrolab collaborate on technology for harvesting resources and building infrastructure on the moon. So the companies have completed concept study to integrate lunar excavation hardware onto the Flex rover. The Flex rover is the large rover that can carry crew and is under consideration by NASA for a contract. So they're going to say they're working together to integrate Interlune excavation technology onto the Astrolab Flexible Logistics and Exploration Vehicle, or FLEX for short. Interlune is operationalizing their novel system to harvest industrial quantities of natural resources from space, starting with helium-3. So this mobilized excavation technology will also serve various commercial and government customers in moon base site preparation, including the construction of roads, berms, and other structures. Goes on to say Flex as a rover of choice for commercial and government moon missions, and the prototype testing will be centered in Houston. Both companies have research and development facilities and staff based in Texas. They'll be testing with simulated lunar regolith, that's lunar soil, supporting the development of technology and equipment that can operate effectively in the harsh lunar environment. In August 2025, Interlune announced that its technology will be flying on the FLIP rover from Astrolab on an upcoming mission to the moon, and this technology will estimate helium-3 quantities and concentrations in lunar regolith, which is obviously a key piece of technology that Interlune needs to develop before they move on to commercial scale operations. So the article goes on to say both companies are a new generation of space companies developing technologies with extensive commercial and government applications. Interlune Technology is developing dual-use lunar infrastructure, commercializing natural resources from space, while Astrolab is focusing on designing, building, and operating a fleet of multi-purpose commercial planetary rovers. It's interesting that Astrolab says operating. That is because these rovers can be remotely operated from Earth, so they could provide mobility as a service. Even when there's no astronauts, the rover can still be used. It could be used for exploration or for surveying, or based on the technology on the rover, the payloads, it could potentially place payloads on the surface or pick them up later or scoop up dirt or lunar soil or whatever. So that's the first news segment, and it's covering 2 of the 3 lunar terrain vehicles that are in competition for a contract with NASA. So we've covered Lunar Outpost Eagle and Astrolab's Flex rover. The one rover we haven't covered is Intuitive Machines' Moon Racer vehicle that's also in contention. And hopefully later this year, NASA will make an announcement about which one of those rovers has won the award. And hopefully the other 2 will continue to operate because they potentially could get commercial contracts or contracts from other space agencies or governments. Anyway, let's move on to the second story this week. So let's bring it up here. And it's on the excellent website called EuropeanSpaceflight.com. And this is by Andrew Parsonson. So I'll put the link into the video description so you can read it yourself. But let's quickly go over it. It's titled Infinite Orbits Goes on Spending Spree After Securing 40 million euros. So Infinite Orbits is not a company I'm familiar with. So let's just read what it's about. So Infinite Orbits announced 2 acquisitions. Back-to-back deals coming less than 4 months after the company closed an oversubscribed 40 million euro financing round in November 2025. So it looks like the company's on a spending spree at the moment. They bought 2 companies in just 4 months. Toulouse-based, so it's obviously a French company, Infinite Orbits is developing Endurance, a satellite life extension spacecraft. So this is a space startup that's working in the ISAM sector, or in-space assembly and manufacturing, or orbital economy. It's not to do with launchers. It's just to do with moving things around in space, protecting things in space, imaging things in space, moving or refilling or refueling or deorbiting satellites and other assets in space. I think we'll see this sector grow bigger and bigger with the AI satellite mega constellations. There'll be more demand for moving these satellites around, deorbiting them, refueling them, and so on. So anyway, let's continue with the article. Orbit Guard, a small spacecraft used for close-range monitoring of geostationary satellites. SES, which is a European satellite company, is to use Endurance to extend the life of one of its satellites from 2027, and also the French Directorate General for Armament to provide Orbit Guard spacecraft to monitor threats to French military assets. So this Orbit Guard sounds like it's some kind of bodyguard satellite for military satellites or high value or high asset satellites that need protection. And Orbit Guard will provide some kind of monitoring or surveillance or protection for these satellites. So Infinite Orbits announced that it was purchasing a company that describes itself as a specialist in autonomous space systems. And this allows the company to equip its Orbit Guard surfacer with advanced space situational awareness software. The quoted is saying, taking another step towards building Europe's surveillance capacities. They also recently bought Lunasa Space, which is a UK-based company specializing in technology for autonomous rendezvous and proximity operations. That's usually abbreviated to RPO or RPOD, Rendezvous, Proximity Operations and Docking. So it goes on to say the purchase will further strengthen the rendezvous proximity operations and docking capabilities of this Endurance spacecraft, and the Lunar Space Assembly will be integrated and testing facility to bolster its manufacturing capabilities. And this is part of a broader European expansion, and they'll have new offices planned in Luxembourg, Spain, the UK, Germany, and Poland. So that article is talking about a French space startup that's working on life extension missions or potentially orbital debris removal, or moving satellites to a graveyard orbit, or potentially in the future refueling and providing general space situational awareness. So I think this market will just get bigger and bigger over time. So let's move on to our final story this week. Okay, on to the final story this week, and this is on the reaction to the NASA announcement of changes to the Artemis program, which is NASA's mission back to the moon, this time with about 60 other nations as part of the Artemis Accords. So NASA and ESA and JAXA and many other countries are working on this program to send astronauts back to the moon, but this time in a sustainable way. I did a video the other day talking about the new Artemis cadence, and there's been some pushback and some response to that. So let's just get into the social media posts. So this is Eric Berger from Ars Technica, who's very well connected in the space industry. His reaction to a Daily Mail article. So if you're not familiar with the Daily Mail, it's a UK newspaper. So Daily Mail is saying, just admit it, we're never going back. NASA fans are furious at the US Space Agency as it pushes back the timeline for its Artemis moon missions yet again. Well, I guess it's true that Artemis 3 was supposed to be in 2027, although realistically no one believed that timeline, but it was technically 2027. So now the first manned mission to the moon will be at the earliest 2028. So technically you could say it's pushed back, but realistically it was never going to be in 2027. That's been known for a long time. So anyway, in response to that article, Eric Berger says, the non-space press missed the key elements of Isaacman's revamp of Artemis. So Isaacman, if you're not aware, is the new NASA administrator, and he announced the changes to Artemis recently. So they perceived it as some sort of delay, which is wrong. Technically, it was Sean Duffy who moved the lunar landing to 2028 last year. But in reality, under his plans, there was no chance of an Artemis landing this decade. The dates were all fiction. Isaacman is changing things to make a 2028 or 2029 landing possible. That nuance may be hard for some to grasp, but it is reality. That's absolutely true. Even 2028 is a push. Either SpaceX has to get a lot done this year with the refueling, or Blue Origin has to make a lot of progress on their moon landers for even 2028 to be possible. And of course, the Axiom Space spacesuit has to be certified as well, which is not a given at this point. So in addition, Eric Berger says, in a recent podcast at We Have Miko, nailed a key part of this. Isaacman has been quite good about saying uncomfortable truths about NASA and Artemis out loud. He has clearly diagnosed some of the major issues facing the space agency, not flinched from them, and is trying to address them. In this case, the uncomfortable truth was that the Artemis Emperor had no clothes, and if meaningful changes were not made, China will win this race going forward. Again, absolutely true, and even with these changes, I think it's quite likely that China will get to the moon before NASA does, and that's because they're still saddled with the SLS and with Orion. Congress will not allow the SLS and Orion projects to be cancelled, so that's what NASA has to use. Even though there are commercial heavy and super heavy lifters available or soon to be available, we also have this post from NASA saying we have increased the cadence of Artemis missions. In 2027, the Artemis 3 mission will test one or both commercial landers from SpaceX and Blue Origin in low Earth orbit. In 2028, Artemis 4 will become the first Artemis lunar landing. So I'm not entirely convinced 2028 and Artemis 4 will be the first crewed lunar landing. It depends upon there being no delays with Artemis 3, and Artemis 3 checks out. They can do the docking, they can do the undocking, they can test the EVAs using the new spacesuit, and everything goes okay. In that case, then 2028 is possible, assuming, of course, that the landers are certified for crew, but at least it's possible. And if they do land in 2028, they can beat China, which is likely to land in 2029 or 2030. And we also have this post from Jared Isaacman, just reiterating the new changes. So he says we're endeavoring for not just one, but 2 moon landings in 2028. So in the next coming weeks, Artemis 2 around the moon, assuming they fix the helium issue. Mid-2027, Artemis 3 rendezvousing with one or both human landing system providers from SpaceX and Blue Origin, testing spacesuits from Axiom Space in low Earth orbit. Early 2028, Artemis 4 lunar landing with crew. And late 2028, Artemis 5 lunar landing, beginning work on lunar base. So that will be the MPH, or the multi-purpose habitat. That's been developed by the Italian Space Agency. And that will be the Artemis base camp. So I don't know if it's going to be ready by 2028. Hopefully it'll be ready. That's being built by Thales Alenia in Italy. And that's part of the European contribution to the Artemis program. This is how we get back to the moon with urgency to stay. That is from Jared Isaacman, and that is the plan. If you want all the details, I just did a video the other day on the new Artemis cadence and the new plan to get back to the moon. So please check that out. In terms of my next video, I'm probably going to do a video on Firefly. There's quite a bit of news. I was going to include it today, but there's 2 or 3 or 4 items I want to go over. So I think it makes sense as a separate video. So that should be out on Friday. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.